And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, at the Big Bernie rally, LA City Councilwoman Isabel Urado listed her qualifications for holding that high-honored office.
I'm born and raised Highland Park. I'm a daughter of undocumented immigrants. I was a teen mom on food stamps, a college dropout.
Wait, those are her qualifications to be on the LA City Council?
Yes. Anything else, Isabel?
Oh, I forgot to say, I'm also queer, so I've been coloring outside the line for a very long time.
Well, I don't know about those being qualifications for city council, but maybe they're qualifications to have a country song written about you.
We said yes to that, although it was between her and Kevin De Leon.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a California state senator representing Huntington Beach in the California legislature. You can get him online at stricklandforsenate.com. Senator Tony Strickland, welcome.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. And first, I want to talk to you about the insurance crisis here in California, because I'm sure you get calls from your constituents on a daily basis of people who are being dropped from their policies, or their insurance companies want them to take pictures of every square inch of their house because they're looking for excuses to drop them from their policies. People who have the fair plan, they're just out of luck altogether, as we're learning right now with the Palisades fire. But the state of California has really fallen on its face trying to keep this industry alive and healthy in the state. And specifically, California's insurance commissioner has been MIA. He doesn't show up to legislative oversight committee hearings frequently. He didn't show up to an administrative hearing that just took place in Oakland that will potentially allow State Farm to raise rates to California ratepayers in short order. He doesn't seem to be interested in the nuts and bolts of the job, but he travels all around the globe going to junkets here and there and everywhere. And for whatever reason, the governor and the legislature have been more than willing to just delegate the job of fixing California's insurance industry to him, when he's demonstrated time and time again he has no interest in doing anything for California ratepayers. What in the world is going on?
We need to attack this, John. I'm glad you brought it up, because everybody has their heads in the sand right now. This is a crisis that we need to fix, and I won't say over the phone I have all the answers. I'm asking folks what we need to do. You know, part of this problem is we have overregulation, as you know, here in California, and insurance companies just, you know, this regulation, that regulation all adds up. And on top of, we don't do things like forest management. We don't have water and reservoirs, and you just can't keep burning down California over and over again and expect to be covered by insurance, because we have bad policies coming out of Sacramento. I would almost equate this. If you remember, John, I was in the legislature when we had the rolling blackouts and the energy crisis. I always said, I'm the one that sued Gray Davis over long-term power contracts, Strickland v. Davis. I always say Gray Davis didn't cause the energy crisis, but it became an unbelievable crisis in California because he put his head in the sand and let the problem spiral out of control. I actually think there's a lot of similarities what's going on here in the insurance industry here in California. Pretty soon you won't be able to get home insurance, any kind of insurance, fire insurance, property insurance, because we do overregulate here, and we don't have someone that's coming up with solutions. And we need to come together and figure out what we can do to make sure that everybody can have adequate insurance. A lot of people, I've heard a couple of, stories that are, one gentleman didn't leave their home because the biggest, property that you have, the biggest asset you have in your life is your home, and ignored the evacuation notice in Pacific Palisades, and he ended up perishing with the home. That's government failure. That's unacceptable, and we need to fix this crisis as soon as possible. And everybody needs to dig in and see what we can do to fix this crisis.
Why do you think Newsom doesn't want anything to do with this? Do you think it's because it's a state issue where really any resolution is not going to be a particularly good look for him? So he just would prefer to talk to national pundits about national subjects because he sees himself as a national figure and a presidential candidate, and getting bogged down in state politics on subjects that really have been neglected for years and years and years is not something that will benefit him.
Well, no, and he's been AWOL over the last, 8 years. Since he's been elected governor, the only thing he's focused in on is running for president of the United States, and he's done a horrific job. I'll tell you, he is the worst governor in California history. It's not even close. I always tell people no one was more responsible for Gray Davis getting recalled than myself. I would kill for Gray Davis today compared to Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, you're right. All he's doing is now he's trying to reinvent himself doing these podcasts. But at the end of the day, if you look at his record, as mayor of San Francisco. He totally destroyed that city. And then he moved to the state of California. And now it's the first time in California history where more people are leaving the state than coming in since the gold rush. We live in an oasis. Look outside right now. People are leaving California in this beautiful weather to go to the humidity and the heat of Arizona and Texas, humidity of Florida, and the cold weather in Idaho because of the policies of Gavin Newsom and the supermajority. They've driven out so many people in California. We've become an economic development agency for states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, and that's unacceptable. End of the day, Gavin Newsom needs to focus on his job. I always thought if you didn't do a good job at where you were, you couldn't move up. But he's the one person. He was mayor and destroyed San Francisco, and now he's doing the same thing to California. We need to turn California around. The reason why I went back to the legislature is because I do think we can make California golden again, but we just need to go back to the basics of government and bring common sense to a place that doesn't have common sense.
You mentioned that you were in the legislature years ago, and I think that gives you a pretty unique perspective because I've talked to members of the legislature who served years ago, and they said that they had no problem getting FaceTime with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor. You'd go to the tent, you'd smoke a cigar, you wanted to bounce an idea off of him. It was easy to do. Jerry Brown, you could run into him in the hallway, run into him at the Starbucks. You could make a case for whatever it is that you wanted to talk to him about. Pete Wilson would be at the bar at Frank Fat's. What I've heard about Gavin Newsom is that members of the legislature, particularly Republicans, have almost no access to him at all and no working relationship with him compared to those previous governors. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. In fact, I've served with 5 governors, and it's not just the Republicans. The Democrats don't have access to Gavin Newsom either. At the end of the day, he's kind of AWOL and focused on running for president of the United States and not focused on being governor of the 5th largest economy in the world. That is absolutely true. I've served with Pete Wilson, Jerry Brown, Gray Davis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this is the 5th governor I've served with. And Gavin Newsom has no relationship with the legislature at all. I mean, he's just not focused on day-to-day duties to run California government.
We're speaking with Senator Tony Strickland, a Republican of Huntington Beach. Senator, the bullet train, which is supposed to have been completed by now, and of course is nowhere near completion, has track that's been laid in the middle of the state from nowhere to nowhere. And recently, the High-Speed Rail Authority came out and said, oh, by the way, we're running even more behind than we told you before, and we're going to need an extra $7 billion. The Trump administration has shown zero interest in giving California any more money for that train. The Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, came to California and essentially chastised Governor Newsom and the state for the mismanagement of that project. Do you think Gavin Newsom is going to try to come up with the $7 billion to keep that train going, or do you think they're going to cut bait?
No, I do. In fact, the first bill I introduced in Sacramento was to defund. Well, my dad always taught me, if you dig a hole for yourself, the best way to get out of that hole is to stop digging. Right now, as you mentioned, we've already spent over $20 billion. We have nothing to show for it. We don't even have tracks laid down. This is the worst public project ever in the history of the world. $7 billion to keep it going. That's just this year, John. They still need over $100 billion. And to put that in perspective, people don't understand what $100 billion is. My last term in the legislature was 12 years ago. The entire budget funding UC, CSU, K-12, all the transportation was $98 billion. California doesn't have a revenue problem; it has a spending problem. In the last 10 years, we've increased our spending by triple, while we're losing population. And you look at this $100 billion. There's a lot of other things we can fund that are worthy of $100 billion. And I'm interested. I hear that the federal government's going to come in and doge the high-speed rail. I encourage that because there's a lot of wasteful spending. The fact of the matter is we've spent $20 billion. It should have been done already, and we have nothing to show for it. We haven't laid down any tracks. And so I think we need to pull the plug on the high-speed rail. And that what also does is another example of people not having faith in government at all. And why would you blame them? They were sold that this whole project would go from San Francisco to Los Angeles for $9 billion when they sold it to the people of California. My last vote in the legislature was to vote against the high-speed rail. And I had my son, who was with me at the time. I think he was in first grade. And I said, one day I'll be taking him to college, and he's going to say, Dad, why is there a train from nowhere to nowhere? And today he's a junior in high school, and it was a premonition that I was exactly right, 12 years ago. This is a project that is nothing but wasteful spending. We need to pull the plug. We need to stop digging, and there's other things that we can do with that money. What I propose is instead of the $7 billion going to the high-speed rail, we lower our gas prices. Right now we have the highest gas cost in the nation, and it's because of our gas tax. And every year since Gavin Newsom's been in office, he's increased the gas tax dramatically. And so we need to lower the gas prices for hardworking California families living, paycheck to paycheck, just trying to make their budget. And, they can't afford Gavin Newsom's increase in gas tax anymore. And so that was my first proposal. And hopefully we can keep pushing as hard as we can to lower our gas prices in California. And then also, let's call it what it is. It's a failure. And everybody in the legislature knows this train, as proposed, will never be built. So let's stop digging, and let's defund it.
Jerry Brown was the governor who really advocated publicly for this train as a monument to himself. And I understand why he hasn't cut bait on it. But Gavin Newsom was the lieutenant governor back then and essentially had no power over anything. Why do you think he is so hesitant to cut bait on this project when it was really Jerry's project and not his?
Well, I think it would be admitting failure among the Democratic majority in the legislature, and failure that they were wrong moving forward and that they didn't have a plan. I said at the time, let's look at public-private partnerships. No one can tell me what they were going to charge. And by the way, how is it a high-speed rail when it has 10, 15 stops, up and down the state of California? That's not too high speed. And if it takes, a whole day to go on a train from San Francisco to L.A., my argument at the time is why wouldn't people still just fly? I believe in free market principles, and this is as far from free market principles as you get. And so I think the reason why, John, is I don't think they want to admit that they wasted billions of dollars and have nothing to show for it.
On his podcast recently, Gavin Newsom said that it was unfair for transgender athletes to participate in girls' sports. There was legislation that went in front of the California legislature that would have turned that into law. It would have said that transgendered athletes could not participate in women's sports. It failed in the legislature because the Democratic majority didn't want it, but Gavin Newsom didn't lean on the legislature to pass it and to match up with what he said on the podcast. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I believe, when you look at Gavin Newsom, don't look at the rhetoric, look at the record. And in fact, when you hear Gavin Newsom speak in a lot of these business groups, he gives a better pro-business speech than I do. But I always say, don't follow what Gavin Newsom says, follow what he does. You're right. He did on the podcast say it's unfair, but when it came down to the legislature, he didn't weigh in at all. In fact, he said he didn't even watch the hearing, I believe. That's the lack of leadership that we have in the governor's office now. And again, he's willing to tell you what you want to hear if you talk to him in person, but then follow up and see what he's doing in terms of his policies. He is just not focused on being governor of California, and I can't wait till we have a new governor, because hopefully we can turn the state around and make it golden again. And again, go back to basics, go back to transportation, go back to water storage to make sure we have enough water. Just make sure, like Prop 36, that's another thing. They just passed a preliminary budget in the legislature and they had zero money in to implement Prop 36. It's a measure that passed over 70% of the people of California voted for it. There wasn't one county that didn't vote for it. And again, a budget's a blueprint of your priorities. They have zero funding for Prop 36 that makes crime illegal again in California. And I'm going to hold them accountable there because their rhetoric says they're going to put it in, but the record is they have a whole bunch of funding for other things, but they're not funding Prop 36. And so I think it takes people like myself, Carl DeMaio, and others to hold them accountable and to talk to folks like you, John, so the average citizens can know what's going on in Sacramento. They thought by voting for Prop 36 that it's done. No, it's not. We need the funding to make sure we implement the policies of 36, and I'm going to fight as hard as I can to make sure that happens.
State Senator Tony Strickland, a Republican of Huntington Beach, online at stricklandforsenate.com. Senator Tony Strickland, thanks so much for stopping by.
John, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day and happy Easter.
You too. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
Maybe you need a refresher on exactly who was this Sheng Tao that we're always talking about.
Absolutely.
Search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts.
And he said absolutely.
Whether it's the Apple Podcast app.
Absolutely.
iHeart.
Absolutely.
Spotify. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can listen to The John Phillips Show.
That's right. I like that. That was amazing.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do that right now. The LA County Fair is back, everyone, celebrating its 103rd anniversary, May 2nd through 26th. Don't miss the country's largest county fair and the best entertainment in Southern California. Tickets are on sale now at lacountyfair.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-795-222. That's 1-888-795-222 gets a 4-pack of tickets to the LA County Fair. Tickets furnished by the LA County Fair. Good luck dialing.
The Fix California Hour continues in moments. Coming up next, we'll give you an update on Pamela Price's podcast. She's the former district attorney in Alameda County who is kicked out of office by voters, and now she's the angriest person on planet Earth, and she has a lot of getting even to do.
She called me a crime boss.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Former Alameda County District Attorney Pamela Price is no longer the top prosecutor in the Bay Area. She's now a podcaster who is busy settling scores.
She's got a lot of getting even to do.
She called me a crime boss.
So Pamela Price, for the past month, has been putting out weekly episodes of Pamela Price Unfiltered, which is a podcast where she goes off on everyone, including the media, for being racist, and that's why she didn't have her job anymore. But, part of the business of doing a podcast is you have to also go on other podcasts to promote your podcast. So this weekend, Pamela Price went on the Everyday Injustice podcast to talk about how racist the media in the Bay Area is.
Uh-oh.
So I'll ask you this question this way. Were you surprised by the vitriol of the media in their treatment towards you?
Absolutely.
Well, gonna save that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I ran for office in 2014. I ran for office in 2016. I ran for office in 2018. I was never attacked
No, you were a gadfly then. Nobody knew who you were. And when you're running for an office, it's very different from when you win that office.
That's right. What happened is that George Soros found the village idiot and decided that he would fund the campaign, or at least pay to get your name out there. And he's a billionaire, so he can spend a lot of money, which he did. And after the George Floyd incident, and Soros's money, you ended up winning an election you otherwise would have lost.
And some of those elections I won, some I lost, and particularly the 2018 race, I challenged the incumbent. I was the first person to run for that seat in over 100 years. And
what? I was the first person to run for that seat in over 100 years?
Well, before 2018, the Alameda County DA was an appointed position.
I see.
So what she's saying there is true.
And I did not experience that level of attack and, media kind of basically
What was that? Did she burp?
I'm not sure.
Kind of.
She didn't burp, but she said burp.
I think she lost her place.
Kind of.
Maybe her lunch is disagreeing with her.
Kind of basically the derogatory tropes and the things that were amplified and publicized by the media. I didn't see that before.
It's so funny how when you look at the political spectrum, when you get to the furthest edges of extremeness, everything is the media's fault.
Oh, yes. And let me tell you something. When you run for office and you have no money and you have no chance and you have no polls showing you being viable, the media doesn't give you positive coverage. They don't give you negative coverage. They just pretend like you don't exist because for all intents and purposes, you don't exist. When you start raising money, when you start polling well, that's when they start paying attention to you. And depending on who you are and depending on what office you're running for, that attention can be positive or it can be negative.
So I think in the age of Trump, it's clearly we have entered a new day in our civil discourse. And that.
So Donald Trump affects the way that newsrooms operate in the Bay Area?
Okay, there are no Republicans in that county. If she's going to say that Donald Trump controls the voters and the media, and that's why she got dumped out of office, she's even more delusional than I thought.
Not only that, but Pamela Price was elected in 2022. She was the DA in 2023 and 2024. Who was the president in 2022, 2023, and 2024?
Quite frankly,
it was Grampy Joe.
So what exactly is this cabal that was out to get her?
Who knows?
Is the cabal that was out to get Pamela Price, I don't know, the victims of crime who banded together because the DA said that the perpetrators of crime were the real victims?
That's who really came after her hard.
I mean, you want to talk about a grassroots effort of people who don't usually have a political position. You look at the recall of Pamela Price. It is organized by a lot of people who are getting repeatedly assaulted in Chinatown.
And that is politics, I'm told, has always been dirty, but it's really dirty now. And the media really amplifies the dirt more than anything else.
Well, that's true, but that's been true since the beginning of television and radio.
And that was...
So is KPIX, KTVU, KRON 4, KGO, NBC Bay Area, are they supposed to not cover when on 4th of July, 2022, somebody explodes the basketball court?
Oh, my God, they melted the basketball court.
Excuse me, 2023. She was in office for that one.
Well, what she suggests, and it's not just her, Sheng was doing the same thing, and other politicians who have a record on crime that they would otherwise not run on, is that they think the news media just shouldn't cover crime. That if you just didn't cover crime, everyone would feel safe. And if everyone felt safe, then no one would blame them for crime. But if you cover crime, that in and of itself is biased and racist and everything else, because you should be talking about something else that makes them look good.
And that was surprising and unprecedented. And the level of attention that we got from the media was simply unprecedented. I mean,
well, it's not news if a district attorney is following the law and executing the law, because that's the job. It makes the news when you are a Pamela Price or a Chesa Boudin or a George Gascon,
quite frankly,
and you have decided to run for and somehow win an office where you want to do everything opposite.
Yes, this became a man bites dog story, where you had a district attorney who was essentially openly advocating for criminals and going after victims.
I mean, one of my deputies did a search and found that my predecessor had been covered there by the media. There were like 2,200, about 2,200 stories in 13 years of her tenure. And in my short, less than 2-year tenure, there were almost 6,000 stories.
By the way, you know what I just learned?
What?
Pamela Price was forcing her employees to Google her.
She had to be an awful boss.
Well, let's not forget, the first edict that she put in her office when she became the DA was she sent out a staff-wide email that everyone was to refer to her as Madam District Attorney.
That's like that episode of Seinfeld where the maestro demanded to be called maestro outside of the confines of the concert hall.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was just unprecedented. Most people in Alameda County didn't even know the DA's name before January of 2023.
It's too bad, too, because she had a rhymey name, Nancy O'Malley.
Well, and we saw a little bit of that, with Chase on the other side of the bay during his tenure.
I mean, no one was a stronger advocate for the criminals than literally the product of two criminals.
Okay, you notice something here? You have a black female in Alameda County, you had a white guy in San Francisco, and you had a Cuban guy in Los Angeles. All of them essentially were advocating for the same policies. They were Soros DAs who were looking out for the criminals and not the victims. And basically, the news media did the same thing in each one of those markets, because the stories on a daily basis of crime, brazen crime, of people not being sent to jail after they were caught, crime victims feeling like they were re-victimized again by the DA's office, that story was told over and over and over again. The race or the sex or the political affiliation of the district attorney didn't have anything to do with it. It was based on their performance and based on all of the outrageous things going on that merited the attention.
During his tenure was that it just seemed like every single thing that went wrong got amplified. Well,
because crime was going in a very bad direction in San Francisco. Bippin went through the roof.
And it was the fault of the DA.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And what we saw, they refined their technique by 2023 from when Chesa was being, pilloried by the media. By the time they got to me, and then you add in the fact that I'm a black woman.
Here we go. Everything is racist when you're Pamela Price.
Everyone's out to get her.
And the fact that I'm a black woman, I definitely they made me out to be public enemy number one. And there was just a level of ferociousness. And additionally, there was no interest at all in amplifying anything positive.
Well, there wasn't anything positive.
No, everything coming out of that office was junk. It was just one never-ending dumpster fire.
Absolutely.
And right now it's time to open up the California Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions?
And Randy, this edition takes us to Union Square,
where motorcycles are doing street takeovers, and apparently there's nothing anyone can do about it.
That seems to be the case pretty much all over the state.
For more, here is KTVU, Fox 2 in the Bay Area.
Yeah, disruptive and all too common. In fact, in the 2 hours that we've been here near Union Square, we actually did see one of those illegal motorcycle stunt shows roll right up Powell Street here. So this is one of those things that the supervisor said is why he's creating this legislation. He says there's already legislation on the books right now for sideshows that now needs to be adapted for these motorcycle stunt shows.
Wait, you need to have a whole new ordinance because a motorcycle is 2 wheels and a car is 4 wheels?
That seems kind of silly.
Illegal and dangerous motorcycle shows roll through the streets of San Francisco weekly, and residents have noticed.
Part of it is really creative, the way they ride the bikes.
What are they doing, circus tricks?
But the other part is really disruptive because you feel unsafe. They don't stop at the stop signs. They don't stop at the street lights.
Wait, isn't that breaking the law?
Yeah, you don't need any extra laws on the books. Just enforce the ones you already have.
It's a coordinated effort pretty much not to follow the street rules and laws.
The shows often include a dozen or more motorcycles, ATVs, and other motorized vehicles.
Wait a second. ATVs aren't even street legal. You can't drive those on a regular road.
That's like bringing a horse and buggy onto the streets of San Francisco.
Who puts a quad on Union Square?
The shows often include a dozen or more motorcycles, ATVs, and other motorized vehicles taking over streets in the city.
It looks like a scene out of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
No kidding.
It's something that has been flagged to me almost every single week because it's happening on a weekly basis now.
Supervisor Danny Sauter said trying to arrest the participants in the moment can escalate an already dangerous situation.
Oh, boy.
This is what they want to do. They don't want to arrest anyone. They want, quote-unquote, accountability, which means nothing, and therefore they don't solve the problem.
So someone's standing on their handlebars as they blow through stop signs, creating a very dangerous situation for anyone on that road, but we don't want to arrest them while they're doing that because that would escalate the situation.
Well, wouldn't that technically be reckless driving?
Yes.
Supervisor Danny Sauter said trying to arrest the participants in the moment can escalate an already dangerous situation. He's working on crafting new legislation to crack down on the illegal shows
that are already illegal.
And just exactly what would he do about that?
Legislatively, we're looking at increasing penalties for actually organizing these events. A lot of these have become spectator sports where they're being organized, they're being promoted on social media.
Yeah, but didn't you already have an ordinance against that for the regular street takeovers?
You know, it's so funny. There are certain things that if you do it, they'll arrest you immediately and get you out of the way, especially if you're doing something like blocking traffic or you're trying to block people's ability to get to the airport, that sort of thing. But then if you participate in a street takeover, which generally speaking spills over into other crimes, because how often do we do stories about street takeovers where they then go and loot a 7-Eleven or something along those lines too? They refuse to crack down on it. They refuse to arrest them. They refuse to put them in jail because they don't want to increase the jail population.
You got to do what they did in San Joaquin County, where they blocked off every possible exit for one of these intersections and then arrested not only every single person who was there participating, but also all of the people watching. And they all got their cars towed, and none of them got their cars back until their cases were adjudicated. And you know what? Street takeovers went way down in that county.
San Francisco police said they are monitoring the shows and cracking down, and said following 3 incidents in March and April, officers have cited 5 suspects in impounded vehicles. The department said it's using the latest technology from the Real-Time Investigation Center to track down offenders. Supervisor Sauter said he will be working closely with police to craft his legislation to modify anti-sideshow laws already on the books.
I do not understand what you need to change about the law. This is a street takeover.
No, what you need to do is you need to tell the cops to not back down, to get aggressive with it, and to enforce the law.
But we've seen that behavior change. We've seen it really go to these stunt bikes and these dirt bikes, and now the legislation needs to change to be adaptive and responsive as well.
Those who've witnessed the impromptu shows welcome any crackdown.
Yeah, I do. I think, anything that'll keep the city safe is a positive.
Police have stressed that these illegal processions and shows are dangerous to participants and the broader public. The supervisor hopes to have his legislation ready within a month or two and expects a lot of support from his supervisors. Again, guys, to give you a sense of just how common these shows are, literally, while we were talking here, while our story was rolling, our pre-recorded element was rolling, one of those motorcycle shows rolled right past me again here on Powell. 3 got people on motorcycles going up the hill, 2 men, 1 woman doing wheelies and then rolled off into the distance here. This is an increasingly common sight here around Union Square, and really.
So we know where they're doing it and that they're doing it every day. It feels like we could figure out an easy way to stop this.
We were just in Long Beach where they had a bunch of roads closed down for the Grand Prix, and if you plugged in the directions on Google, they would send you to streets that were shut down, but I guess Google didn't know it. And it became a real challenge to try to find a way to get to the parking structure so you could get to where you needed to go. In this particular case, imagine all the people, all the tourists who are just following Google, and Google sends them right in the middle of one of these takeovers. What a nightmare. It's dangerous. They need to crack down. All right, we got one more hour coming up on The John Phillips Show.